I just came back from Eretz Yisrael at 4 o'clock this morning. The flight touched down in Newark, and which was good. It was supposed to arrive at 4:30, and Baruch Hashem, it was a very good trip. I hope that it will be fruitful. And I brought you back a souvenir from Eretz Yisrael in the form of a shmuz. And it's very negeya. This week's Parashat will tie it into the Parashat. The Parashat at the end says that finally HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Moshe and Aaron to Parai and to send out Klal Yisrael, let my people go. And of course Parai was unimpressed. Parai said, "Why me, Hashem, Asher Eshma V'Kailai?" Who says? Why should I send out your people? Who is this Hashem that you're talking about that I should listen to him? V'Liyadati es Hashem, v'Gam es Yisrael Yashaleach. I don't know who Hashem is. I'm not sending out Klal Yisrael. And then Moshe and Aaron insist on not only them going out, but they're setting conditions on their immediate release. Derech Shloishes Yom Bamidbar. We're going out for 3 days. In the Midbar, we're going to do our Avodah. And then Parai has enough. He says, "Vayomer Aleim Melech Mitzrayim Lama Moshe v'Aaron Tafriu Es Ha'ami Maisav." Why are you being mafriya? What are you? You're rabble rousing. You're making like revolts, and you're stirring the pot over here. L'chu l'sivlei seichem. Go back to your work. Go back to your labor, which, as you're reading the Psukim Kipshuta, it means go back and be part of the Shibud of Mitzrayim. Who gave you permission? You know, you're punching a time clock. Why are you here in the first place? Like, you should be a slave somewhere. You should be building one of the pyramids or something. That's the Pshuta Shal Mikra, but Rashi says that's not what Parai said. L'chu l'sivlei seichem, meaning this is Parai does not mean to say go to the general civilities of Klal Yisrael and Mitzrayim. Don't misinterpret, says Rashi, that Parai was commanding them to get back to the fields. No, l'sivlei seichem. Go back to the work that you have cut out for yourselves in your home. The shibud of Mitzrayim, the general servitude of Mitzrayim over the Jews, that wasn't applicable to Shevet Levi. And I'll give you a proof to this, says Rashi. Did it ever bother anybody, says Rashi, why Moshe and Aaron, if they were slaves, how did they have this free reign to like make their own time and to come into Parai's palace back and forth? I mean, didn't they have a taskmaster that was requiring them to do hard labor, manual labor? What is this that they're being given all of this freedom to come and go? And Rashi says because Shevet Levi was a Shevet that was miyuchad. Parai said Shevet Levi does not have to go and do the difficult labor of the rest of their nation. They're supposed to stay at home and do their labor. And of course, what is that labor? That's the labor of learning Torah. That was something that Shevet Levi was earmarked for. And if you look in Rav Sternbach's Sefer, he says, look at how even Parai was able to Rav Sternbach he's a very big kanai. And so a lot of his Torah and his Sefer Tamadas is very, sometimes it's very charif. And he speaks very much against, the policies of the government of the State of Israel. But this one actually, it's so timely. He says, every nation in the world recognizes that there are people that don't have to go and serve in the army. They're not supposed to. It wasn't intended for them to. there always is exemptions from the army. If a person is studying for a PhD in a place, they're not going to necessarily draft him to Vietnam. There are certain times, there are certain people that are exceptional and they don't have to go into the army. And they're not required, and nor are they perhaps supposed to. There is always a chiluk of every nation that's exempt. The scholars, the people that are supposed to perpetuate the Messiah and the intellectual legacy of the nation, they're not supposed to go and serve in the army. They're supposed to do sivleis, but it's sivleis sechem, it's sivleis of the Torah. And he says you have a Medina here in Eretz Yisrael that they are being geyser gezeres. And this sefer was written, probably 30 years ago. They're being geyser gezeres against people that are learning Torah Yom V'Layla, that they should go into the army. And they're worse than Parai. Parai at least had the ability to understand that Shevet Levi is miyuchad, and the rest of the nation should work, but not Shevet Levi. They should learn. And our country, after 2,000 years of not having a state, we have a state, and they're trying to get all the yeshiva bachrim to actually fight in the wars. And the famous Rambam, in the end of Shemitah V'Yovel, that everybody has to know, is V'loi Shevet Levi Bilvad. When we're speaking about Shevet Levi and how Shevet Levi is a part of Klal Yisrael that are supposed to be Huvdal, Lavid es Hashem, as Rambam said previously, L'shar Soilo, Iris Tirachav, they're the Paiskim, they're the Malamdim of Klal Yisrael, Yer Mishpat Echel Yaakov, they were Huvdal Midarkei Olam. Shevet Levi was set aside, segregated from all the menial tasks of the rest of the world. They're not supposed to fight in the wars. They don't get nachala. They don't have real estate in Eretz Yisrael. They are supposed to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to be the Chel Hashem, to be the army of Hashem. And then the Rambam concludes and says that it's Loi Shevet Levi Bilvad. Don't think, well, boy, those Leviim, they're some lucky guys over there. I wish I was a Levi. Why'd I have to be born in Shevet God? I wish I was born in Shevet Levi. They're so lucky. They get to learn all day, and we get... So the Rambam says it's not only Shevet Levi that has this great assignment to be Yerim Mishpat Echel Yaakov. It's every single one of us. Any person in the world, Asher Nadva Rucha Yisai, who has a spirit that elevates him, Lahavdil, Ve'evinai Mideya Li'ibada Lamed L'Pnei Hashem L'Shar L'Avdai L'Deas Hashem, they want to dedicate their life to knowing Hashem, to studying the word of Hashem. V'halach Yasher, and they're straight and righteous. They throw off of their necks, off of their backs, the oil, the yoke of the normal way of life, the normal accountings of life that people normally desire and run after. Hashem will be his chelek, this is what the Rambam lays down as his shita in terms of chinuch, in terms of careers. If a person wants to be this Shevet Levi, that Parai says to him, go to your own personal avodah, you could do that also. Not just Shevet Levi are the lucky few that get to be in the elite society of people that are Lemei Torah, but any of those unique individuals that are likely, that are like Shevet Levi in their ability to be uplifted and to say, this is all I want to do. I want to learn Torah, and that's all I want to do with my life. I don't want to do other careers. I don't want to run after other pursuits. So you are now an official member of Shevet Levi, and you are Niskadesh, Kodesh, Kadoshim, you will become sanctified with the holiest of holy Madregas, and Hashem will be with you, He will help you, and He'll provide for you. This is what the Rambam says. Now, if you go to Eretz Yisrael today, it's astounding what's going on. There's such venom that's being hurled right now at the quote-unquote Charedim, not just by, the rabid, anti-frum people. That was always the case. That was every election cycle, that you have certain people. Tommy Lapid, who was nifter a few years ago, he was rabidly, he started a party that today is defunct. It just completely, fell apart, Baruch Hashem. But his whole platform was basically draft those, good-for-nothing yeshiva bachrim into the army and no more of this patur. And he won a tremendous amount of seats. This is going back, maybe 10 years ago. And now his son is running on a similar platform, also popular, but even certain parties that are less, less inclined, one would think, to be so again. It's very in vogue right now to have this policy, even from people in the Knesset or people that are running, be they in Likud or be they in other right-wing parties, even from people, Sardim, Ashkenazim, they are becoming sort of, taken by this notion that it has to be fair. Why it's not fair that why should my son fight in a battle and your son be able to sit in the Beis Medrash and learn? That's just simply not fair. And it's very, very serious, the situation. The elections are coming up very soon, and everything hangs on this. And there's a lot of tension in Eretz Yisrael today. I was being driven to a yeshiva to give a shmooze and a pitch for a yeshiva, and the radio was going in the cab. And so Baruch Hashem, my Hebrew is good enough that I was able to understand the debate. And there was a moderator on this radio program, and there was a frum person, and then there was a very, upset secular person, and they were debating this issue about, is it fair or not that yeshiva bachrim get this special patur for not going to the army, not fighting the war. And I'm not going to get into all of the, it's sort of the same thing that you would, be led to believe. It's the same thing. And both sides really, if you want to really be neutral about it, you could see merit to both sides. If I was a Chiloni, I wouldn't be too happy that there are tens of thousands of people that are not fighting in the wars like my son. That's a very, if you take it from a, not mashgiach standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. And that's what this person was saying. Like, how could you, it doesn't make sense. And they said, well, during the time of Ben Gurion, he made a status quo that the yeshiva bachrim are exempt. He said, but that was, 1948, there were 400 yeshiva bachrim in the whole country that were learning. Today there's tens of thousands, not fair. And the other one says, well, Torah is Megan, but if you don't believe in that, then, if you know, and we do know that Torah is the Haganah of Klal Yisrael, and we do know that, then every nation there has to be the Mamshicha HaMesarah. You can't have, boys at 19 years old going off for 2 years into an army that's secular and that they can't learn, and that's going to destroy the whole nature of the frum people in Eretz Yisrael. But this is a debate that rages back and forth. But in the process of this debate, there was one comment that sort of irked me, or irked me a lot, and that is that the person says, "Af echad lo meit ba'ala shel Torah." Not one person ever died in the Oil of Torah, meaning in the Beis Medrash. As whatever you want to say, that it's difficult for yeshiva bachrim, they're learning and they're steiging, but nobody ever died in the Beis Medrash. And people die all the time on the battlefield. So it's very unfair. And it's not fair that there should be this select group of people that are basically dodging the draft. Why should they not be in the same boat as us? This is what this person said. And when they said this, it immediately got me thinking about the pasuk of Zayis HaTorah Adam Kiyamas Ba'aya. This is the Torah of a person who dies in the tent. It's talking about Tumas Meis, but the Gemara famously darshans this pasuk, Zayis HaTorah. You want to know what the Torah is? Ein divrei Torah miskaimin ela b'misha meimis atzmai aleha. The Torah only has a kiyum. This Zayis HaTorah. You want to know how there's going to be a kiyum in Torah? Only if a person dies in the aisle of Torah. It's unbelievable that they use this lashon that af echad lo meit. Nobody ever died in the aisle of the Torah. The pasuk says that the whole Torah requires a person, in fact, to die in the aisle of Torah. And what that means is quite simply this. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach once said in Shir that there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Adaf Tzadi Dalam Mebeis. Noatz Chizkiyahu. There was a war going on, and Chizkiyahu HaMelech stuck a sword. Al Pesach Beis HaMedrash. He took a sword. He jabbed it into the doorway of the Beis Medrash. The Amar, and he says, Kol mi she'eino osek b'Torah yidoker b'cherev zu. Whoever is not learning Torah now, to Shas Milchama, whoever is not learning Torah will be stabbed with this sword. So, Frek Reb Shlomo Zalman, we know that Bittul Torah is not a good thing. It's very, very bad. Bittul Torah is, one of the worst averos. If you look in the Musar Svarim, the Svarim that speak about Torah, and one of the worst things, Bittul Torah is Keneged Kulam. It's a frightening thing. That when we do things that are not during Seder supposed to be done, it's a terrible taina against us, a terrible avera to interrupt Torah. When you're learning, you're supposed to be learning. When you're playing ball, you can play ball, but when you're learning, it's supposed to be a complete matzav of learning Torah without bittul, without breaking it up at all. If you have to, obviously, you have a personal tzarech, if you go to the bathroom or whatever, you come back in, that's not bittul Torah. But if you start schmoozing or taking a cell phone call or doing other things while we should be learning, there's a terrible, terrible sin called bittul Torah. But we never find that it's such a bad aver that it's chayim misa. It's a lav. It's a terrible lav. But there's no chiyam. What did Chizkiyahu HaMelech mean when he said that whoever doesn't learn Torah is going to get stabbed? I'm going to behead him with a sword. Well, how could that be for bittul Torah? So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said like this. He says that during a Shas Milchama, which is when this was, Chizkiyahu was fighting Sancheiriv, a very major battle. And so there were people that were putter from engaging in battle. They were learning Torah, and Torah we know is Megan. And it is Matzah Klal Yisrael, and there are many Maramekaimes for this. How the battles that Klal Yisrael win are because, in no small part, the learning Torah, the Torah that's being learned in the Batei Midrashim. But, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, you have to understand that if that's true, and it is, you have to, when you're learning Torah, you have to be a soldier just like a soldier is. If you're in the army, let's say you're in the army and you go AWOL, and you run away from battle, absent without leave, you get afraid and you start running away. You know what they do to you in most armies when I don't know in America what they do, but in most armies of the world, throughout world history, if a person goes AWOL, if a soldier runs away, b'shas Muhammad, off with the head. He's dead. You can't have an army with sissies. You can't have an army that, that enemy looks really, really scary. I'm going to just, head back home, hightail it, and see it. Like, you'll never, that's not an army. An army needs people that stay and fight through thick and thin. And if a person runs away, he's dead. He's chayav misa. And Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says that if there's a shas milchama and you're in the army of Torah, that's fine. But you have to know that you can't go AWOL. And going AWOL in the Beis Medrash means being mevatel Torah. So Chizkiyahu HaMelech says, you're going to be learning Torah. That's your responsibility. There are people fighting the war with guns and tanks, and then there's people that are fighting the war with Torah. That's your responsibility. But if you go AWOL, if you're not Eisik B'Torah now during the Shas Milchama, Yidoker B'Charavzu, you're going to be Chayav. It's equal. There's parity between the laws of battle in the battlefield and the laws of battle in the Beis Medrash. You have to be here. If you're not here, then you're Chayav Misa. B'Shas Milchama, we need you. If you're not here, you're like a soldier that runs away, you're Chayav Misa. This is what Rav Shlomo says. The Chavetz Chaim once told a story about a man who was married for many years, and him and his wife had a makolet, like a grocery store together, and every day he would, like Bakashi, he would go run by Nates and Davin to Vasikin, and, run home, maybe wolf down a quick breakfast, and then run to the store, open up the gate, and start, the customers would be coming in to buy supplies early in the morning, to buy food. And this was his life, and every single day he would come in early by the crack of dawn, open up the store, work with the customers, with the inventory, and then he would close the store late at night, and he'd be so tired he'd just fall into bed and go to sleep. And one day he scratches his head and looks in the mirror and says, you're not getting any younger, and you never really learn Torah in your life. You're going to die soon, you're going to go up to Shamayim, they're going to ask you, Kabat Yitzim Atah, you're going to say no. It's going to be Bizyainis. Says, I think now, Baruch Hashem, we have enough money in savings. I don't need to do this every single day, from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. I want to be able to dedicate a few hours in the morning before I go to work. I'd like to dedicate that time to learning. But he knew that his wife would not stand for this. His wife, was very into the business and very into work, and she didn't want to hear from any of this stuff about learning. So he didn't even consult with her. What he did was, one morning after davening, he sets up a chavrusa with himself, very nice person, also retired, sitting in the Beis Medrash, says, what are you learning? I'm learning Makis. Oh, do you mind if you teach it to me and we'll learn it together? He says, sure, no problem. So they learn together for about an hour and a half, and he comes out with a smile on his face, and he walks to the store, to Simcha, and sure enough, his wife is waiting there, and she's beet red. She's so upset. She says, where were you? Don't you know we opened the store at 7 o'clock in the morning, and now it's already 9:30, and customers are coming. They were asking for you. They needed supplies. They needed to know things. Where in the world were you? What held you up? He says, no, he just thumped an answer and rolled up his sleeve and started working. The next day, again, comes in, rolls into the store 2 hours late, and his wife is like fit to be tied, and she's going crazy again. Where were you? And again, he just sort of like brushes her off and starts working. The next day, his wife, she's not smart, and she follows him after, to davening. Instead of walking to the shul, for some reason he's walking to like a Beis Medrash, and then she looks through the window and she sees after davening that he's sitting with a chavrusa over a Gemara and they're learning, and he's enjoying it, the husband, and she runs into the Beis Medrash and she starts screaming at him in front of everybody else, embarrassing him. What are you doing? Don't you know that we have a store to run, we have a job to do, this is our business, we're partners, and you're here learning Torah? What's going on with you? What happened to you? I need you, come to the store right now. And she starts pulling him up by the lapels and schlepping him out of the Beis Medrash. And he says to her like this. He says, let's say, for argument's sake, that I didn't wake up this morning. Let's say I went to sleep last night, I said good night to you, I said Kriya Shema Lamita, and I never woke up. And today was my Kfura. And now I'm in the Beis Olam. Would you come to the Beis Olam and start screaming at me to get up, it's time to go to the business and to go to work? Obviously not, it's ridiculous. If your person's dead, he ain't going to work. He says, from now on, until 9 o'clock in the morning, from when I wake up in the morning until 9 o'clock in the morning, consider me to be dead. I am not alive anymore until 9. There's Tchias HaMesim at 9:15 every day. Until then, I am dead. And I don't want you to think that you could come and share my learning because I am not alive during that time. And the Chavetz Chaim says that this is the pshat in that Gemara, in that Chazal, of Zeis HaTorah Adam Ki Amos Ba'ayel, that Ein Divrei Torah Miskaimin Ela B'Misha Meimis Atzmei Aleha. Torah only has a kiyum. The only way that you will ever succeed in learning Torah is if you're Meimis Atzmei Aleha. Now, simply put, Meimis Atzmei, you kill yourself and you're learning Ba'melos and Ba'asmada, and that's also definitely true in the Chazal. But the Chavetz Chaim says, on a much more basic level, even if you're not the biggest, lamdin in the world, and you don't have the skills to mamish, like they say, Reb Chaim Brisker used to, wrap a cold, wet, cloth around his head and, tie it, because his head was so, steeped in learning that he was, his brain was going to explode. So he had to, cool off his brain with that. Even if you're not Reb Chaim Brisker, and you're not mamish killing yourself in learning, you're not exerting all of those muscles in your brain that would really, you would theoretically, your brain is ready to explode from it. But on a very simple level, we could all be Mekayim this Chazal. If you just consider yourself dead to the world when you're sitting and learning. Which means, if I'm dead, then I don't get any phone calls during learning because I'm dead. I remember there was once an article, somebody died and he wanted to be buried with his cell phone, just in case he might wake up. He always had this fear of being, that he, there are sometimes people thought to be dead, and then all of a sudden they, in the middle of their funeral, all of a sudden the coffin opens and the guy pops out. There's all these stories you hear about, not too common, but he had this juk in his head that he was going to, be buried alive. He wanted a cell phone with him. So I remember they published the guy's number in the newspaper, and people were calling him. While he was underground, they were leaving him messages and, call me back or whatever, just shtick, until they shut off the guy's phone. It took a long time. And, some people think that even when you're dead, you could still have a phone. When you're dead, you're dead. There's no more cell phones when you're dead. There's no texting when you're dead. There's no email when you're dead. There's no Facebook. There's no Twitter. It's all shut down. When you're dead, you're dead. And so the Chavetz Chaim says that if you want to kill yourself, you want to be Meimis Atzmei Aleha, it's very simple. Just shut off your cell phone during Seder. Stop every time something comes into your mind, you have to talk about it. And the emes says that if you look around the Beis Medrash, guys in this Beis Medrash in particular are very, very good with this. It's very rare. I always say I'm the only guy that battles all day in the Beis Medrash. Every single guy is really learning. I'm schmoozing with people. I'm having a good time. Everybody else is learning here. Baruch Hashem. But that's what the Chavetz Chaim says, that if you want to know how to have kiyum in Torah, you want to really be able to learn Torah and learn Torah well, you have to be dead to the world. There can't be any other things other than learning when you're learning. There's a story that's told about a very famous Gadol. I've spoken about him before. His name is Rav Ephraim Zalman Margolis. Rav Ephraim Zalman was one of the Gedolim in a Dar Deya, the times of the Chasam Sofer and the times of the Gra. And he was, what really makes him an amazing figure in Klal Yisrael. He happens, interestingly enough, to be a great-grandfather of Rabbi Moshe Bamberger, who we mentioned before. He was not only one of the Gedolei Hadar, and he wrote svarim that many of us are familiar with, such as the Mata Ephraim. If you look through the Mishnah Berurah, it's come out every page has many sightings citations of the Matzah Ephraim. That's the sefer that he wrote on the Avodah of Tishrei, and from Rosh Hashanah all the way until Sukkot. And he has many other svarim. He has tshuvas, and he has a whole wide array of svarim. But not only was he a great gadol, he was also one of the richest people in the world. He owned a bank in Vienna, which he bought somehow when he was young, and it became a tremendous malucha that he had. And the Chasam Sofer was maspid him after he was nifter, that he was one of the few individuals that were Torah u'gedul m'makom echad. He had Torah and he had prominence in one place. He was wealthy beyond, he was maybe a billionaire in today's standards. Very super wealthy and super gain, super Talmid Chacham, a gadol of the first caliber, all together, all in one package. And he had a policy. This is where Moshe Sternbuch brings this somewhere in one of his svarim. He had a policy similar to what we just spoke about in the Chavetz Chaim of Adam Kiyamas Ba'ayel, that he wanted to be Meimis Atzma. When he was learning, he was learning. He had a business, and a very successful one. And he wanted to let the business prosper. But during the morning hours, he would never, ever want to be disturbed. And so let's say he would go to davening at 6 o'clock in the morning. He would go into his private study, and he would not be disturbed until, let's say, 1 o'clock. I don't know the exact hours, but let's say, for argument's sake, it was 1 o'clock. And he told his butler, or shamus, no one is to disturb my learning from the time that I go into that room until the time I come out. After I come out, that's when people can meet with me, tzedakahs, businesses, whatever, fine. But during that time, I am dead to the world. I don't want to be disturbed. And one day, there was a very big multi-billionaire that came to visit Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, and he knocked on the door, call him Bill Gates. He comes to the door, he says, I have a very, very big deal to make with Rabbi Margolis. I need to speak to him urgently. The deal is going to vanish very soon. We have to do the deal. He's going to make a fortune on it, one of the biggest deals ever in history, and I'm sure that this is something that you would want to hear. So he says, no, Rabbi Margolis has his policy until 1 o'clock. Come back 1 o'clock. I won't come back 1 o'clock. I'm Bill Gates. Don't come back anywhere 1 o'clock. It's now or never. The deal is going to be dead if he doesn't come out right now. So, who knows? Maybe Rabbi Margolis would have liked to have been, told of this opportunity. So very gingerly, this shamus knocks on the door. No one answers. Again, he knocks on the door, opens the door, and Ephraim Zalman is completely immersed in his learning. He looks up. He says, "What do you want? What do you need? Where's the fire? Don't you know that I don't want any disruptions during this time?" He says, "Yeah, but there is, Bill Gates is waiting for you. There's a deal." I don't want to hear about it. This is time that I'm makdish to learning. There is no batala. I am dead to the world. I am dead. There is absolutely nothing that I want to know about during this time. And he continues learning and steiging and amelos and harabanya. 1 o'clock he comes out, and the way I think a lot of us always think of these stories, they always have to have a happy ending, right? The guy, double. He was so impressed with his principles that he doubled the deal, and $2 billion. No. Ephraim Zalman came out. He says, "Is Bill Gates still here?" No. He left in a huff and a puff, and he said, "By the way, I never want to do another deal with this guy in the rest of my life, and he was very upset at you, and he's not coming back, and you lost out on potentially a mega deal, one in a life, could have catapulted your wealth, tenfold." And instead of being upset or bitter or despondent, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman started dancing b'simcha. He was so happy. And they said, "Did you hear what we just said? You lost out on billions of dollars. What are you happy about?" And he said, "See, when you go up to Shamayim, how do you know how they're going to put a valuation on your Torah? How do you know? Is my Torah and your Torah the same? Is every single person sitting and learning? Do we get the exact same equal units of schar for Torah? He says that can't be. He says the way that you're judged, the way that you are evaluated as to how chashuv your learning is what did you lose for your learning? How much were you willing to sacrifice for your learning? And so I showed the Rabbeinu Shalom now that my learning is worth, for me, millions and millions of dollars. Had I not, stuck to my guns, and had I made the deal, then maybe my learning would be much less. The valuation would have immediately shrunk to beneath whatever range the deal was. But now I show that the sky's the limit. My Torah, the way I evaluate my Torah, it's limitless. I think Reb Chatzkel maybe once said that, when a person, let's say, goes in the middle of Seder and he's really thirsty, he doesn't need a drink, but he's in the mood for, if you need a drink, you need a drink. But let's say you don't need a drink, so you go up to the soda machine and you get a Coke and a Reisman cookie and then you come down. I'm not saying that you can't do this if you're really starving and whatever, you didn't eat breakfast and I'm just using it as a mashal. It says when you go up to Shamayim and you're expecting all of the schar of learning, they're going to say, okay, here's your schar. They're going to give you a Reisman cookie and a can of Coke. That's your schar. What do you mean that's? I thought Torah was value. I thought I was going to get like trillions in Hana and Eineg and the Iduna Amiti. No, because you showed on January 4th that that you were willing to forego learning. You were in the middle of a taisus, and you gave up that taisus in order to go and get Coke and a Reisman cookie for when you didn't really need to. And so you showed what you value your Torah is, meaning Torah for me is not as worth it as it's okay, so Mazel Tov, here's your Reisman cookie, you got really what was chashuv to you, copy your learning. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman said that your Torah is defined by what you evaluated it. If we are mevatel our Torah for stupid things every minute, so obviously it's not so chashuv to us. But Rabbi Ephraim Zalman was showing by foregoing $1 million deal that's what his Torah was worth. I was actually in one of the yeshivas I was speaking about Rabbi Chaim Zalman, slightly, maybe not too different a context, but somebody came over to me afterwards who was a Rebbe of Reb Gifter, who was a Talmud of Reb Gifter, in Telz, a very close Talmud, and he said that he always used to speak about this Reb Ephraim Zalman Margolis, Reb Gifter. And Reb Gifter said that he used to be called the Balabas he was from a city called Brot. He was the Balabas from Brot. That's what he was called. He didn't have an official position in the city that he lived, but he was known as the Balabas, but he was a person that everybody sent shilos to from the whole world. And he himself, when he would paskin for himself, would always consult with the local rav in the city, because it was obviously probably much smaller than him. But you go to the rav. The whole world was sending him shilos, and he himself used to be machnia himself to the local community rabbi. And he said like this, that in the 1940s, Rav Moshe wasn't known to be Rav Moshe yet, Rav Moshe Feinstein. He wasn't known to be the Galadar. He was a Paisik, and he was a great Paisik, but he wrote a tshuva, which was published, and in the tshuva it mentioned that he understands that the Beis Ephraim, which is the name of the state, one of the Psalm of Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, he paskins a certain way, based on a certain understanding. He says about him, "V'nela mimenu gemara achas." Apparently, this Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, it slipped his mind. He forgot a certain Gemara that clearly says against what he was trying to say. So that was, and then the tshuva continued. He passed it against Rabbi Ephraim Zalman. So Rabbi Gifter wrote a letter to Rabbi Moshe saying that, first of all, it says in the tshuva, if you look up the tshuva itself, he brings the Gemara, and he's matcha the Gemara. He says, he explains the Gemara away, or he buys by Akasha, but anyway, he passes what he does, knowing the Gemara, and in spite of the Gemara, he has other Gemaras that he marshals, and he knew the Gemara quite well. And Rav Gifter adds, he says, and he's not a Rav in New York. Don't think he's a Rav in New York that, he doesn't know all the Gemaras. Not a Pashut Rav in New York who can be Na'am Imena Gemara. He was the Gain. He was the Gain Hadar, Rav Chaim Zalman. That's what he wrote to Rav Moshe. And then fast forward to when Rav Moshe was Nifter, and Rav Gifter was maspid Rav Moshe and tells, and he was crying bitter tears of Gift. He says, how did I have the chutzpah to write a letter to Rav Moshe of that kind? To tell Rav Moshe that he's not, Rav Chaim Zalman's not a Rav in New York who could forget Gemaras. Who in the world was I to speak in that fashion to Rav Moshe Feinstein? And he was begging Mechila Barabim from Rav Moshe for saying such a thing. There's another great Meister of Rav Chaim Zalman. Rav Chaim Zalman was he was very close to Rav Kiva Eger. And there's a lot of, I think, tshuvas back and forth between the two. And Rabbi Kiva Eger's granddaughter, I believe, got engaged to a boy from the city of Bruk, of where Rabbi Chaim Zalman was living. Rabbi Kiva Eger was in Posen. And Rabbi Chaim Zalman was in Bruk. I don't know how far away, but it wasn't easy for Rabbi Kiva Eger to travel. But he wanted to be by his granddaughter's Vart. But he wasn't going to, as an old man, he wasn't going to start traveling that far just for a Vart. So he writes a letter to Rabbi Chaim Zalman, and he says, would you please do me a favor? I can't be there, but I'd like you to represent me by my granddaughter's Vart. You'll sit at the dais, and people will be aware that you are standing in place of me. And normally Rabbi Chaim Zalman, he was such a big Talmid Chacham, and he was such a busy man, like we described. He didn't have a minute to waste. So if he would ever go to a Vart, probably never went to a Vart in his life, but if he would go to a Vart, he'd come in, he'd say, Mazel, he'd run out. And I'd say like about Rabbi Victor Miller, he always, when he went to a chasna, he went, and he always carried his raincoat with him, or his coat with him. He went in, he said Mazel Tov, and he went out again. Even by his own children, but grandchildren's chasnas, he always walked in with a coat in the middle of the chasna, or whenever he said Mazel Tov, and he ran out to leave. And, and they were very upset, like, this is not, you're the grandfather, you're supposed to be here from pictures all the way till he went. He says, I'm preparing for a big bechina. I don't have time, I'm preparing for a big bechina. What big bechina are you preparing? You never know. You never know when your number is up and when your day has come, and they're going to give us a faher and shamayim, and I have to cram. I have to. Maybe tomorrow's the day. I don't have time to dance over here and to waste my whole night. I'm coming. I'm saying Mazel Tov, I'm leaving. So Rabbi Chaim Zalman normally was exactly that way. He would come in for a minute, say Mazel Tov, and leave. This Vart, he came first before the photographers. There weren't photographers. He came before the caterer came. He was sitting there, and from beginning all the way to the last person left, he was sitting there. And like his family got very nervous. Like, where is he? They started calling, putting out an APB. Like, where is Ephraim Zalman? He was supposed to be home right away. Comes home, it's like 12 o'clock at night, and the whole family's desperately worried. Where were you? And he says, you don't understand. He says, Rabbi Kiva Eger wrote me a letter and telling me that I am his shliach for the night. And we know that shlucha shladam kamaisai. Says, so I was Rabbi Kiva Eger tonight. I was the great Rabbi Kiva Eger. Says, if I could be Rabbi Kiva Eger, I want to stretch out that as long as possible. So I'm not giving that up so easily. I'm going to be there first, and I'm going to stretch it out until the very last moment. I am going to make sure to be Rabbi Kiva Eger. But this is the yesod that we see, that a person, if he wants to die in the Ayel Shel Torah, doesn't mean you have to completely break out. It would be nice to be in the Madrega, to be completely, killing yourself and learning. Halabai, that's a beautiful thing. But more simply, a person has to shut off his cell phone. A person has to shut off the world when he's sitting and learning. You don't have to. You only have to if you want to be successful in learning. You could be unsuccessful in learning and do whatever you want. But if you want to be successful in learning, if you want to be one of those yechidim that are really steiging and really getting geschmack from learning, a lot of times people come to me and, and understandably so, they say, Rabbi, I don't have a geschmack in learning. I'm not enjoying learning. What should I do? And, there's no easy answer to that question. There's a lot of eitzes and all this, but, it's hard. You have to, but the one most essential thing is, if you don't learn with this type of attitude, that when I'm learning, then it's very hard. It's not geschmack. If every minute the phone rings, you answer it, then you got to get your mind back into the taisus, where you were holding, that kasha, that teretz. It's sort of like very thorny and very unpleasant. But if, let's say we would be able to shut off our phones, and during this time I'm completely into taisus, then it's geschmack. Then you could think like a mensch, you could have a mahalach, you can even have a chiddush once in a while, but it takes the ability to turn off the world. And it's so easy to do, but yet so hard. I want to tell you one other thought on this inyan about dying in a tent. That's simply put, it's pshuta k'mashmai. I saw recently a Maisa, there was a 23-year-old bacher learning in BMG, in Beis Medrash Gavaya in Lakewood. And this bacher came to night seder, had a chavrusa, and they were screaming and fighting in Abaye and Rava, and all of a sudden he has a heart attack and he dies in the Beis Medrash. 23-year-old bacher. Never happened in the 50-year history of Lakewood. Never did such a thing happen. And there were big hespedim given by all the Rosh Yeshivas and of the yeshivas that he went to before he went to Beis Medrash Gavaya. And they were, saying what unbelievable madrega this is to die. If you want to die somewhere, that's the place to die. Right in the middle of Beis Medrash, right over your Gemara. No bigger schus. And they were taking takanas and what we could do to improve ourselves. It was a whole maimed. And that was basically the story. But there's a tremendous postscript to this story. A friend of his said about this bacher, that very night that he was supposed to go, that he was supposed to die, he went out for supper in a restaurant with a group of his friends, because one of his friends were leaving yeshiva, they were going somewhere else, and they made a Sudas Preda in a restaurant. And they were eating, and they were speaking about this guy that was leaving, and they were, having a very nice, pleasant, enjoyable evening. And, when you're in a restaurant, the clock, goes extra fast, and you just, you want to stay and you want to enjoy. And this bacher, to his great credit, looks at his watch and says, "I'm sorry, Rabbi Isai, I'd really like to stay longer, but I have to go to night seder. My chavrus is waiting for me." So, his friend gives him an elbow, "What are you doing? Don't you know that Beryl is leaving, going to Eretz Yisrael, and, it's not nice, and, we are not even up to dessert yet, and how would it look, and it's not there, don't be so frum." He says, "Listen, take my credit card, pay for whatever I owe, and more, whatever you want to do, I have to leave. It's not nice. My chavrus is waiting for me by night seder, and I should stand him up because I'm in a restaurant. I said my speech, everything is fine, I'm going, goodbye." Benches, and he leaves. And, people were a little miffed. They weren't so happy with this. But that night, half an hour later, 45 minutes later, he was nifter over his Gemara. And his friend said, let's say he had not done that. Let's say he had not had the gevura to give his credit card and to leave. And he would stay there, and, like most of us might succumb to the pressures of peers and, give in, and it's not nice, and it's there, all these heterim that we have for ourselves. He would always be known as the yeshiva bacher who died in a restaurant. He's the guy, remember he died in a restaurant. And not that there's anything wrong with dying in a restaurant, but it sort of brands you for eternity. He's the guy that died in the restaurant. So you always, forever, you think of the guy as being a gashmistic type of person, very makushim, and he's very into, restaurant. Who knows what type of restaurant it was? It might have been a very yeshivish, but people think it's who knows? He's whining and dining. He died, and he was always the guy that died in the restaurant. But because he had the gevura to say, no, I have a chavrusa and I want to be in the Beis Medrash when I should be in the Beis Medrash, he will always be known as the bacher who died in the Beis Medrash. And My hesafa to the Vard is that the pasuk there says, "Zeis ha'Torah Adam kiyamas ba'ayel." This is the type of person who dies in the ayel. And how does the pasuk continue? Kol ha'ba'al ha'ayel. You have to come to the ayel. You know, part of dying in the ayel is when you're sitting in the ayel, like we said, turn off your cell phones and try to focus during that time, whatever it is, if it's an hour, if it's 10 hours, if it's 5 minutes, try to just completely focus on what you're learning. That's part of it. But there's another part of it that we don't always think about, and that's kol ha'ba'al ha'ayel. Sometimes you have to kill yourself to make it to the ayel. To get to the base medrash, sometimes it's so hard. Even if we're in the dorm, we're tired, we're lazy, we're not in the mood. To put our shoes on and to walk, 30 seconds into the base medrash, it's so hard. But that's also part of this. And because that bacher had the gevura, the inner strength to say, I have to and I want to and I will, that makes him forever the bacher who was Adam kiyamas ba'ayel. He died in the ayel because he was ba'al ayel. You have to come, and when you come, you have to be. You have to come to the ayel, and when you're in the ayel, you have to be in the ayel and not have any distractions. That's what the pasuk is saying to us. And in this day and age, I don't have to tell you how distracting these cell phones are. And all of the things, when I was growing up, there was a payphone. And I remember my 7th grade Rebbe used to say, he was learning in Chaim Berlin, and in the old days, he had a payphone. And it was like a big deal. You got a call, somebody's calling you, and they'd hang the phone. There was a wire, and it would hang, and you tell the person, he'll be right there. And so this guy who got the phone, it was nice of him. He went up to the base medrash, and he says, Moshe, you have a phone call. He says, oh, thank you. And he continues learning with his chavrusa. My Rebbe did. And he said, comes back like 3 minutes later, didn't you hear me? You have a phone call. He says, thank you. He continues learning. Just comes back, you have a phone call. So my Rebbe said to him as a 7th, as a young bacher, he says, I don't understand. He said, I'm busy learning. It's because somebody put a nickel in the phone. That's how much it used to cost me over there. Somebody put a nickel in the phone and calls me. That means that I have to run and get the phone call? Nowadays it doesn't even cost a nickel because some guy calls, okay, if it's your grandmother from Boca, and she's not feeling well, and you think this might be it, fine, okay, pick up the phone. But if it's a regular guy that, let him call me after Seder. Where's the fire? Why do we have to feel, and I'm no different, I'm not here, preaching, trust me, you know me, every single time I'm speaking really primarily to myself. Why do we have to pick up the lousy phone? Because somebody called us, that means that's more important than my chavrusa sitting in front of me? One time I was in a jewelry store, I was buying jewelry for my wife. It was like a birthday or something. And the sales lady was schmoozing on the phone with somebody. It wasn't really business, it was just I was there first, and she was helping me. All of a sudden she gets a phone call, and she starts speaking 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm like fuming, like I want to, so she says, I start walking out. So she says, where are you going? So I said, I'm going outside. She says, well, why outside? I said, well, I'm going to use the payphone outside. I'm going to use the payphone for what? I said, I want to call you. She said, why do you want to call me? You're here. I said, because obviously you'll give me better service if I'm not here than if I'm here. Here you have a live customer, in real living color, and I want to buy something from you because somebody calls you on a phone. There's like a naya kedusha to this, to that deal over me. And that's how you have to look at it. If you're with your chavrusa is sitting like a good boy. He wants to learn with you, and you have another competing phone call. And you're gonna, and now the phone wins over your chavrusa? Doesn't make sense. But this is what we do every single day. This is Yisayid HaYisayidus. The Yisayid HaYisayidus, if we want to be Matzliach in learning, every one of us, myself included, we have to make takanas for ourselves, not broad, big hafganot, for ourselves. Can't we turn off the phone when we're in the Beis Medrash? Can't we come to a Beis Medrash when we're supposed to be there? If it's night Seder, let's be here at 8 o'clock at night for night Seder until 10 o'clock. First Seder, let's try to be here on time. Our Chavrus is waiting for us. It's not a chutzpah that there's a person sitting and waiting in the Beis Medrash, and we keep him waiting 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. Isn't that not nice? That's what it takes to be Yamas Bayim. All of these things were coursing through my veins and through my mind when I was listening to this radio program in Israel. And this person says, nobody died in the Ayel Shal Torah. And you know something? If that's true, if that is true, that we're not dying in the Ayel Shal Torah, then the Chilonim are right. It's not fair. If we have a casual, lackadaisical approach to learning Torah, the Chilonim win the argument every single time. Because it has to be equal, like Rav Shlomo Zalman says. There's no privileged class in Eretz Yisrael. There shouldn't be just because I decided to wear a black hat or I was born into a right-wing family, I don't have to take a gun in hand and fight in Gaza. Why is that taka fair? It's not fair. There's 1 hectare. If you're willing to die in the Ayel Shal Torah, if you're willing to die to the degree that the Chayalim are willing to die on the battlefield, then we could start winning the argument. But if we're not willing to do that, if our Torah is very shvach and we're standing outside Beis Medrash most of the day smoking, and we're on the inside of the Beis Medrash, we're talking on our phones and having coffee breaks, then that's not fair. Then they're right. The Torah can only be kayim if we're willing to be meimis atzma laha. If we can kill ourselves, not kill ourselves, if we're not all holding there, unfortunately, to mamish break our heads over a taisus. We're lucky if we're here and we're able to learn the taisus to begin with on a simple level. But when we're learning it on a simple level, can't we just learn it on a simple level? Do we have to have this break in the Ritzifas every single 5 minutes or every hour? Every time somebody comes over and starts talking, we schmooze. Every time the phone rings, we take it. Every time somebody wants to go out for a walk, we go out. A coffee. We're not going to be able to claim that we are as the Rambam says, that we are the Baruch Hashem Cheloi, that we're the Chel Hashem. We are the army of Hashem. In what way are we the army of Hashem? Because we say we are? We're the army of Hashem when we show that we are regimented like an army, that we're organized like an army, that we have all of the discipline that a soldier in an army needs. That's when we show that we're Taka Baruch Hashem Chelai, Ufal Yadav Tirtzeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy with us, but only when we have Taka the Chayalim of Hashem. And we have a lot to learn from the Chayalim on the army, on the battlefield, and apply that to our daily lives in this Beis Medrash. All of us. We have to take our Zmanim seriously. We have to come on time and leave on time more. And when we're learning, we have to try to turn the world off. There is no world. We are dead to the world. Then we could be Meimis Atzma Allah. And then we will be the Shevet Levi that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has said that we could be if we want. But it all starts from this commitment to the Teres Hashem in the purest, most consistent form. Halabai, we should all be Zaycha to glimpses of Shevet Levi in our life, and it will start in Mitzvah Hashem when we decide that we taka want to be part of the Chel Hashem. Have a good Shabbos.